Good morning. You know, I was thinking about this thing that we do every week, gather, and I wanted you to think about something. We gather to go. Like, you're not going to stay in here. Nobody's going to stay in here all week, right? But you gather to go, and one of the going things that we do is we serve in East Africa and also in West Africa, in Liberia. And part of that mission is we want to be light and salt to those people that are there. We want to give them hope. We want to give them Christ. And so we're excited about that. But Zach and Jordan were over there for a month, and we know Lindsay was over there for a year. Lindsay, are you going back? Do we know that? But she's going to be going back, and that's exciting. I knew you were, actually. But while we're over there, we did something, and somebody mentioned here not too long ago that we really don't talk about our trips a whole lot up front here. And I think for me, it's like there's too many things going on. Like, there's too many things that go on in these trips. How do you adequately express it? And so one of the things that went on the last 2 years, we put on a Revive retreat. And I want Jordan to tell you what that retreat was and what that retreat is and what is the heartbeat behind that retreat.
Yeah, so we, last October on our trip, we put on the first ever Revive retreat for all of the missionaries serving in Liberia. And it was something born out of wanting to serve the people who are serving. And I think it is so easy to look at people in ministry and put them up on a pedestal sometimes and forget how much they need poured into. And it's easy to look around and name other people and cultures and things that you see that you think need help, so that's where you pour out. But from living over there last year and befriending so many missionaries, we really realized how much of the heartbeat is the people who are living and serving over there, how dry their cups become. So as a mission, Hope 2, we wanted to bring encouragement and refreshment to them. So last October, we went over there and put on the first retreat. And when we did that, we had them at a certain point write down like some things that, I think it was just something they were wanting to give to God, a response that they were taking to the cross type of thing. And we collected all those papers after that. And the response on them, honestly, it was overwhelming. It was humbling, maybe a little shocking, but shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I think it was overwhelming because we recognized in their responses how dry their cups were. These people are missionaries in other countries, and some of them have been there for years, and they're just so beat down. And in this retreat that she mentions, we wanted to put something on that they couldn't get in country. No, in the entire country of Liberia, there's nothing like this Revive retreat, and we wanted to just serve them and just let it all be about what God's doing in their ministry and how can we fill their cup, how can we encourage them, how can we revive them. And so it's been good, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, and the outpouring from them of how they received that first retreat made it, we had already said we wanted to be trying to do this, but then after we had that first one, it wasn't even a we want to, it was a we need to keep doing this in country. So on this last trip we just took in July, we put on our second annual Revive retreat. And today when you got here, you were given this booklet, the Revive Retreat Prayer Requests. And this was put together by some of our Crash Youth Group students, which is also cool. But in here, we collected from all of the missionaries that were there something that they wanted prayer for. And we told them, we will be praying for you, for your ministry. Some of them included their names, some of them didn't. But when we came back, we were kind of wrestling with, all right, we told them we'd be praying. What does that look like? And you guys are the answer to that promise we made to them. We handed this out so that you guys, some of you who have been to Liberia, some of you who have not, it doesn't matter because you're all a part of the mission going on over there. And this is a way to take ownership in something that God is doing in that country. And some of these people, many who you may never meet, you can pray for what they wrote down at that retreat and for their hearts and their ministry. And it was just something we really wanted to bring to you guys and give you the opportunity to be a part of that, because it is significant and we saw how much they need it. And it's a really cool thing to get to be a part of.
In the back of that, you also added some other things.
That is true, yeah. In the very back, there's a section that says, pray for our Hope 2 staff. So we listed out here everyone who serves in Liberia with, well, they're all of our Liberians. We did not include our missionaries on that. I realize that right now. But all of the actual physical Liberians who are part of our staff, they're listed in there, their position, what they do. And if you would take time to pray for them too, you may not know how much they are lifting you guys and this body up over there. But having lived there and gotten to be a part of their Bible studies and their prayer times, know that they keep you in their prayers constantly, and they ask about you and they remember you. So this is also an opportunity to be able to remember them and lift them up. So that's what this is. We hope you'll take it home, spend some time with it, because it's a great opportunity to remember others.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know how to give you perspective of the movement of God, but I really, sometimes I feel desperate to do that. And today, in this booklet that you've been given, you have an opportunity to impact, to make an impact, because God hears your prayers. One person in that booklet, his name is Kim. And Kim told me when I sat down with him, he's in our Hope Center over there, and he is, I don't know how to say this, but he's like a drifter. He's like a wanderer, you know? I mean, like, he told me one time, I think I'm just going to go sleep on the dock. You're going to go down and sleep on the dock in the lagoon? Yeah, he works in the interior, and he comes to our Hope Center a lot just to get respite. And he kept telling me, man, you don't know how much this means to us. Nothing like this is being done, nothing like this. But just another thing that he mentioned in passing. In his outreach into the interior unreached people groups, they had over 500 people give their lives to the Lord here recently at a revival. Over 500. These are the people that you're praying for. These are the people that you're touching and your lives are touching and your prayers are touching. So I appreciate it. I remember when I went over to Liberia in 2011, we decided as a ministry that we needed to buy some land. We were spending so much money on lodging over there. We take about 60 people a year on mission in Africa. And we were spending so much money, we wanted to build our own lodging, but we had to kind of jump off a cliff. We didn't know how to do it, so I just went over there by myself to buy land. And I remember we went to old Pa Roto's village, down this dusty road, trail-like, and I'm sitting in the village, and they'd say they have land in behind their place. You couldn't see it because of the forest and because just how much growth was there. And I remember they took me back to this lagoon, and I said, we want to buy all the way around the lagoon. Now, this is old news for some of you, but some of you it's brand new. But we're standing on the edge of this lagoon. I said, I'm just thinking this is perfect. If we could buy all the land around this lagoon, we could control the lagoon as well, and we could just have just such a powerful place to be where ministry could happen. We ended up buying that land, and we've developed it, and that's where we stay, in case you don't know. But I remember being on this side of the lagoon, looking across, and they wanted to show me the other side of the lagoon. And so we were going to walk across the lagoon, the water. I'm like, okay, we're going to walk across here. All of them sit down, and they start taking their shoes off and their socks off to go through this lagoon and hiking their pants up. Not me. I left my shoes and my socks on, and I just rolled across that lagoon, and they thought I was the craziest person ever. They're like, what are you doing? Why would you risk ruining those nice shoes? And I'm thinking, why would you risk ruining those nice feet? I mean, if you stepped on something out there. So it was interesting because it just showed me a difference in the culture. Well, today we're talking about, kind of about your feet, kind of about shoes, and you'll know what I mean, I think, by the end of this message. But they're the next piece of armor that Paul gives us to put on. And we're in this series talking about the armor of God. And I've been sharing with you that we are in a battle. We are in a battle. You know, I went to McDonald's earlier this morning. I had extra time, so sometimes I'll just go in there and I'll sit, and I like to stare at people, and I'll get a coffee and I'll just sit and watch. But it was a battle zone in there. It was so busy, it was so confusing, it was so congested. How many of you got stymied in McDonald's? Scott, only you and I. He walked in, said, "There's no way," and walked back out. But people were so angry and they were so tense. Before you got there, they were mad because their orders were wrong. They were mad at one another, and it was just so much tension in there. And the thing that I've wanted to do in this series is I've wanted us to recognize a truth, that we are in a battle, that we are in a spiritual battle that's going on, and it is felt in the physical. And what Paul does in Ephesians chapter 6, if you want to turn your Bibles there, I want to read our text that we're going over every week. And I just want you to hear it. But Paul's in prison, and he's writing a letter to the church in Ephesus. And toward the end here, he tells us to put on this armor. He's put on this armor. And so let's read that together. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities and against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. There is a battle going on, whether you're sleeping through it, whether you're aware of it, whether you're actively advancing or engaging that battle. There is a battle that is raging in this world. And Paul is talking about that. He says, therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything to stand, stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet, this is where we're at today, fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. He says, stand firm in this battle. And he gives us these pieces of armor, these things to put on, these things to do for the battle. And he says, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Another version in that same text, instead of fitted, it says for us to shod our feet. In other words, put on gospel shoes for the battle. Shod our feet. I read an interesting article. I was doing some research on this, and about this piece of armor that he talks about. And it shared some great insight, and I want to pass that along to you because I want us to really think about what Paul is saying and why he's saying it. And so many people believe, and rightly so, that Paul encountered a lot of Roman soldiers. And so in his writing, it was influenced by the fact that everywhere he went, there were Roman soldiers, and he was in prison, many, many times. But it's interesting in this article because it shared a different perspective and made me look at it a little differently. He said that a lot of the things that Paul talks about are actually resembling everyday clothing of a temple priest. And the article went on to say that the temple priests do not wear shoes. And so that was interesting to me, because it got my attention. If you were to ask me about the armor of God, right? I think you could ask a lot of people, and they say, well, there's a sword, right? There's a shield, there's this breastplate, there's the belt of truth, there's this helmet, and then there's these shoes. And I've always thought about these shoes. Are they steel-toed? What were they like, right? What would they be high tops? Would they lace all the way up your shins in case you got struck by something? I've thought about these shoes. Paul says in the text, he said, shod your feet with the gospel of peace. And I want you to listen to what shod your feet, what it means. This article shared this, and I thought it was so powerful. To shod means to bind under one's feet, to be in bonds, to tie, to wind, to knit, to be at one with. It also has to do with our walk and how you're walking your life from day to day. I thought that was interesting. We are to shod our feet with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. This is how we prepare to stand in the battle. And so I thought about this whole idea that we're to wrap underneath our feet, all the way around our feet. We're to be shod, right, with the gospel of peace. And it just gave me such a different perspective because, I wanted to set something up here to remind you, this belt of truth buckled around your waist, right? That the truth of Christ should be at the center point of your life. Is it? That this breast of righteousness, right? That it's a borrowed righteousness. It's Christ's righteousness. That it has a place in your life and it should be in its place. Then I thought, actually this week, early on, I thought, well, man, I need to get a pair of shoes and set them up here. But I want you to remember actually what the word shod means. To bind underneath your feet, all around you, everywhere you walk. I want this to be the thing that represents that. Shod your feet. The article went on to look at the word peace and what that means. And this is what it had to say. God is saying that the gospel that you are to bind on your feet to cover every step you take is peace. Every step that you're taking underneath your foot, over top of your foot, guarding your step, every step should be peace. And it also, the writer of this article reminded me that Jesus is what? That Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He's the Prince of Peace. The word peace that Paul refers to in the text is actually the word shalom, which means more than simple, hey, relax, just have peace. Like when you have a lot of noise and you just want to get alone and you want peace, right? Peace and quiet. It's actually a lot more than that. Its meaning is to wrap your feet with complete peace, with contentment, with completeness and wholeness, to make sure that you bind your feet in well-being, in harmony with God, in tranquility. I started thinking about this word that Paul uses for peace, shalom. It carries such a powerful, complete confidence. I don't want to bore you with somebody else's thoughts, but they're so powerful. The article went on. It said, peace is God's victory over evil. He consumes his enemies and releases peace, health, safety, rest, wholeness, and the absence of discord. In that climate of peace, we can receive instruction from God and receive his direction. Shalom reconnects us with God when our minds are full of fear. See, I think it's so powerful when you look a little deeper at things that the Bible says. And I'm guilty, I don't know if you are, but I'm guilty of just reading through things, right? And just getting through the word and say, okay, put on the shoes of readiness, right? Okay, put on these shoes, and not thinking any more about that. But I want us to think a little bit more about it. Shod your feet with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. You see what Paul's saying here. Now, his audience. What do we know about his audience? His audience were being thrown in prison too. His audience were people who were being killed for the faith, who were being beaten for the faith. His audience was an audience that was in a battle that was real. Have you watched any news? Have you noticed the tension that's in our culture and in our world today? Don't you think that there's something going on in our world? It has been since the beginning. Discord from the beginning. And Paul is telling us that we should wrap, your feet are pretty important. How many of you have stepped on a nail? How'd you do with that? I stepped on a screw one time. You know how hard it is to get a screw out of your foot? It's not easy. But I'll tell you what I wasn't doing. I wasn't running with that screw in my foot. I wasn't moving around too quickly and see how very important your feet are for the movement of the gospel, for the movement of you in this life, for the battle that you're in. It's so important. I have two things that I want to consider with you today that I want you to think about. And the first is a question. What is your greatest enemy? Did you think about that? What is humanity's greatest enemy, right? It's not the person next to you, right? It's not the person at work. It's not the person that cuts you off in traffic, right? Your greatest enemy is death. Humanity's greatest enemy is death. And the truth is, our enemy, death, has been defeated. Isn't that powerful? When you live in the flesh, you live in defeat. When you live by the Spirit and you live in God's truth and you live with Christ wrapped around you, you live in victory. In these shoes of readiness that come from the gospel of peace, I think they represent some things that we should really think over, we should consider. And I want to give you those things to consider. And here's the first. You will never be ready against an enemy you cannot defeat. How many of you played sports? I come from a really small school. And our coaches would try to prepare us, but there were some schools that we played that were so big and so powerful and so, just unbelievable that it's just going to be bad, right? I remember this one team, we had like 16 people on our team one year, and this team had 54 players on their team, and they were jogging around our field. It was at our own home football field, and they were just chanting, "Who are we going to beat? Vestaburg. Who are we going to beat? Vestaburg." And they beat us brutal. It's just, I think there's this truth that we need to understand. We need to grab a hold of. You will never be ready against an enemy you cannot defeat. And death is not something that you can overcome. There's not a person that you know that will actually physically overcome death. It's humanly impossible for us to win against death. But the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that Jesus did overcome death. Jesus did defeat your enemy. That is the gospel message, and that is the gospel message that these shoes that Paul talks about represents. Paul shares something in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 54 and 55. He says this: death has been swallowed up in victory. Death has been swallowed up in victory. And he goes on to say, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? I want you to think about the peace that we have in the victory that Jesus has given us over death. That should breed such a confidence in you and give us this confidence that's unbelievable in the battle. In fact, I think it's part of our witness. As we march forward in a world that is falling apart, and we have this unbelievable peace and confidence that comes with knowing the gospel of Jesus and knowing that we're okay when everything else is falling apart. People look onto our lives and say, how are you doing it? And what we were tempted to do, right, is say, well, I'm pretty strong. Well, I'm pretty amazing. That's not true. There's not one of you that can overcome death, your enemy. All we can do is point to Jesus. This is why. This is what you see in me. What you see in me in the midst of the battle. Why I'm not defeated. Why I get up. Why I stand up. And I'm not talking about me. This is you. All of us. The world should look on us and see something that is different. Because in the battle, we are beaten. We are oppressed. We are, even in death, the righteous have a refuge. It says that. Think about that. Even in death, the righteous have a refuge. There should be such a confidence that we have for this battle. And you know that's interesting because what we're doing, we're putting flesh shoes on our flesh feet, and then we're stepping on things that are piercing us and killing us, slowing us down. But if you will shod your feet with the gospel of peace, with the victory that God has given us, you'll walk through anything. You'll walk through anything. As I was thinking about this, I thought of David, this story that we know so well, David and Goliath, right? This little boy rolls right straight from the fields to the battle lines, and there's this incredible battle that's been going on for over 40 days, and there's this giant, we all know, Goliath, who is stepping forward into the valley, and he is defying the armies of the living God. And he's saying, fight me, morning and evening. He's doing the same thing. And he's laughing, and everybody's laughing. The Philistine armies, they're just laughing because God's army is scared to death. And with all their armor and all their strength and all their might, they are standing on the sidelines day after day after day after day. And here comes this little boy, David. And when he hears, he just happens to arrive when Goliath comes forward, and he's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who thinks he can defy the armies of the living God? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. I'll fight him. They even try to put all this armor on him, right? They try to put Saul's armor on him. He says, I don't need any of that stuff. And what's always struck me about this, been several things, but it's the statement, it is the confidence that David has in his God. And I want you to listen to the words that David rolls to the end, and the only thing that hesitates or makes him hesitate at all is he wants to make a proclamation before he goes and defeats the giant. Because he wants everybody to hear what he's about to say, including the Philistines, including this giant. It makes Goliath mad, actually. Listen to what he says. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the one, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down, I'll cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. What do you think his brothers are saying? What do you think? What do you think that all the army of Israel are back here saying? Yeah, settle down. Take it down a notch. Could you take it down a notch? Come on, David. This little boy, I don't even know what he's wearing. He's got this leather strap, right? This sling. And he's mulling around by this stream. And he stands up and he makes this incredible statement. And you're about to grab him, right, and pull him back. Okay, you said, and he takes off sprinting toward the giant. I love it. He goes on in his great proclamation, all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves. Do you know that? Shod your feet with the gospel of peace. It's not by sword, not by spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. You know, I guess the question that we have to deal with today is, are you running toward the battle or away from the battle? Are you even ready? Are you ready? Do you believe that you will overcome your number one enemy in this battle? Do you believe that? I don't mean, do you believe it with every ounce of your failed flesh? Every ounce of your being, every ounce of your failed venture, of your sin, of your struggle, do you know that you will overcome your greatest enemy in Christ? Jesus. See, because Jesus is he already has the victory. It's certain. It's not in question. It's in the books. It's already marked in the win column. There's no fight to be had for you. That's what Paul is saying. There's no fight to be had. Just shod your feet with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Shalom. Have confidence. You've already won. Be encouraged. I want you to understand something about you. If you are a follower of Christ, if you are a Christian, do you know that death is afraid of your Savior? Death is afraid of what you have done in your surrender by clothing yourself with Christ, by binding yourself up with this gospel of peace. Shod your feet with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Last thing, here's another thing I want us to think about this week. We need to be ready. I know I've already said it, but put your shoes on. Put your shoes on. Be ready. 1 Peter 3:15. It says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have." I think a sign that we're not ready sometimes is when people do give us a compliment and they, man, how are you doing it? That moment comes. Have you ever had that moment and you're just not really ready to give the answer? Think about your answers a little bit more. Always be prepared to give a response for the hope that is inside you, right? When people ask, how are you different? What is your deal? And if people aren't asking you, maybe you're not, maybe you're walking around shoeless. Maybe you're walking around shoeless. Are you ready for the battle now? Today? It's a good question, right? There's this tension that exists in my home. Do you mind if I Kathy, I saw she walked out with a baby, so I think it's a safe place for me to tell you now. I don't think she'll rehear me preach this. It is you ready to go yet? Tension? And some of you are laughing because you understand what I'm saying, right? Like I'll be in the chair and she'd say, "Hey, we're leaving." And I said, "Okay, we're leaving. I'm ready. We're leaving." And she'd tell me 2 or 3 times, "Hey, we're leaving." And I said, finally, I'll get up. I thought we were leaving at 3. It's like, I don't know, 10 to 3. Why are you getting me now up and around? I'm ready. I'm ready whenever you say, I'm ready whenever you head out the door. You had that conversation? Careful. You chickens. Some of you are like, and I've even been out in the car, right? I've been out in the car and thinking it's 3:05, it's 3, and I'm like, what is going on? And have you ever headed back in? I've headed back in. I say, what are you doing? I've headed back in and I've sat down before. I'm sitting down. That's it. It's over. You laughing, Joe, because you know it's true. It happens, doesn't it? You know, in Africa, I in the morning times, I always tell people what? What do I tell people? Do you remember? Get in the car. But in the morning, I'm saying, don't wake me up. If we're leaving at 9, what time do I want you to wake me up? 5 till. But there's always that person, there ain't no way he can get ready in 5 minutes. So they'll come over and they'll get me up at 8:45, like, you know, or whatever it is. I'm like, why are you here? Well, we got to go. I'll be ready. I'll be ready. I need 5 minutes before I need 5. That's it. Are you ready? You get the question? I'm overdoing it here. Are you ready? That is the question. That is the question. I think it's interesting when you think about being ready for what comes next. I'm not so sure we are. And we can sit around and we can sweat this truth, but I don't think that we are. And when I say we, please look beyond yourself, look beyond this room. I'm talking about the believers in our nation even. I don't know that we're ready for what's coming next. And I wonder sometimes, this is a question that came to my heart this week as I was thinking about, am I ready? Is who's paying the price for me not being ready? Ask that question this week. Maybe sometime, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. Maybe you can ask this question. Maybe you'll wake up with it. I don't know. But who's paying the price for me not being ready? Not having my feet wrapped with the gospel of peace. Who's paying the price? Certainly we suffer, don't we? Don't we know that we suffer? Sometimes that's where we stop. We stop right there and say, well, it's just hurting myself, right? It's just me, that's all I'm hurting. I want you to consider that perhaps the lost are hurting. And maybe they're suffering because this light that we're called to shine, that God wants us to shine, as we walk around in the battle with the gospel wrapped around us, the salt and the light of Jesus wrapped around us, maybe it's those in the dark that are suffering as much or more than we are. I thought about how the gospel has been hindered by our lazy, unprepared ways at times. And I've been challenged this week, convicted really, actually, to be ready. Am I ready? Am I ready for every conversation? Am I so ready that I'm looking for it? You ever run into somebody that's looking for an argument? Right? And you say something, and they're expecting this, but you actually said something nice, but then they hit you with all their argument, and you realize, you were hoping that I said that you were. Why can't we be ready with the gospel? Why can't we be looking for an opportunity? I don't know why, but I thought about Noah's story, right? You know so well. And I thought about, for 100 years he was mocked. You know, it took him 100 years to build the ark. For 100 years, people thought he was crazy. Oh, you're still building that thing, huh? At year 20. At year 47. Still doing it? At year 77, he's still doing it. At years 91, he's got 9 more years. 9 more years. How much ridicule do you think he took as he and his family worked on this ark? And he's telling people, a flood's coming. Repent, a flood's coming. Hey, God is going to destroy the world. God is going to destroy the world. God is coming back. Jesus is coming back. Be ready, prepared. Are you ready? I wonder how the intensity of his message went. Did he stay the same intensity as he did year 1? And when I think of the story of the rains coming and the flood and that big old giant boat and all the animals as he's gathering the animals, and such an incredible story of being ready, wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? I've always wondered what it was like when the rain started. I've often wondered what it was like when the water started to rise. You know, they were having babies. They were getting married. Somebody had their marriage day when the rain started. Somebody had a funeral. Somebody had a child was born on that day. How much sorrow did that day hold when they looked and they realized, they wished, oh, if I could just have a chance again, God. If I could just be ready. Jesus even tells the parable of the 10 virgins, right? The bridegroom is coming, Jesus says. And 5 of them were ready and 5 of them were not, right? And that parable is such an incredible story that Jesus tells. And the whole point of it is, be ready. Are you ready? So I want to leave you with 2 questions to wrestle this week. And then we're going to have, you guys can come on up. We're going to sing a song. And if you have a decision to make, if you just need help in your life and you just need prayer, I invite you to come forward as we sing. But the 2 questions I want you to wrestle with this week is this. Do you feel like you're ready? In other words, if you were to die this week, are you ready to face death? Are you ready to face God? Or do you have some decisions to make? And I want you just to pray on that, okay? I just want you to think about that question. Are you ready to meet God? I just want you to pray on that. The second question that I want you to take with you this week is, are you ready? Are you living ready for mission? Are you living ready for mission? In other words, Jesus gave you victory over death so that you would advance into the darkness. Gather to go. We gather, we center ourselves around someone who traded places with us, right? And then we go with his message into the darkness, with his salt, with his light, with the gospel of Jesus, to a world who desperately needs it. Are you ready to advance his name into the darkness? Or do you have some work to do? And you need to pray about that. So that's the 2 questions that I want you to wrestle with this week as we talk about shodding your feet with the readiness of the gospel of Jesus, right? The gospel of peace. I want you to think about, are you ready to meet God? Maybe you've solved that. Are you ready to be at the mission, the missionary of God, to be on mission, to advance into the darkness? So if you have a decision to make, the altar's open. You're welcome to come forward, and it doesn't have to be something that's public even. It has to be something between you and God. And so I invite you to come. Will you please stand?